everyone. My name is Carrie Ost. I'm a member here at the Ethical Humanist Society, and I'm really happy to see you all today. I'll be your moderator for this morning's program. First, to help create a better shared understanding of who we are as a community and what we believe in, I will share a quote from the American Humanist Association. Humanism is a progressive life stance that, without theism or other supernatural beliefs, affirms our ability and responsibility to lead meaningful, ethical lives capable of adding to the greater good of humanity. Our programs address a wide variety of topics, including current events, philosophy, arts, and sciences, to name just a few. Today's presentation is part of our ongoing programming related to humanism. This morning, our speaker is Mandisa Thomas, and her talk is entitled Rethinking Humanism and Secular Activism. After the presentation, the audience will be invited to ask questions. Mandisa Thomas is the founder and president of Black Nonbelievers. Mandisa has many media appearances to her credit, including CBS Sunday Morning, CNN.com, and Playboy, The Humanist, and Jet magazines. She has been a guest on podcasts such as The Humanist Hour and Ask an Atheist, as well as the documentaries Contradiction and My Week in Atheism. Mandisa currently serves on the boards for American Atheists and the American Humanist Association, and previously for Foundation Beyond Belief and the Secular Coalition for America. She is also an active speaker and has presented at conferences and conventions for the Freedom from Religion Foundation, Secular Student Alliance, and many others. As the president of Black Nonbelievers, Mandisa encourages more Blacks to come out and stand strong with their non-belief in the face of strong religious overtones. Please welcome Mandisa Thomas.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you, Carrie, for that wonderful introduction. I really do appreciate it. It is a pleasure to be speaking with you all virtually. And I just realized that this is my second time speaking with the Ethical Humanist Society of Chicago. So it is a pleasure to be back with you all. And I see some familiar faces and some folks that I know and love tuning in virtually. So thank you all once again for joining me and this organization today for this presentation. Yes, the title of my talk is Rethinking Humanism and Secular Activism, because I think it is still a subject that very much needs to be discussed, especially as we see this changing landscape and this environment that we are dealing with right now. And as humanists and non-believers and atheists, et cetera, how we continue to engage will really make a huge difference in the future. So without further ado, I'm going to share my screen, which is my PowerPoint, and get started. So to start off, yes, I am the founder and president of Black Nonbelievers, as was mentioned by Carrie. We have been going strong now for 11 years. We got started in 2011 in the Atlanta area and expanded to a national organization to really increase our presence and our activism nationwide. I currently live in the Atlanta area, but I am a New York City native, born and raised, and I pretty much had a secular upbringing. And for those of you who have not heard this story maybe 1,000 times before, I will kind of give a brief version. So I'll be 46 years old this year. I don't mind dating myself. And I was born during a time where being immersed in Black history and culture was very common, especially in the New York City area. And so my parents made a conscious decision not to raise me and my brothers in the church, or at least not to attend where we had to be indoctrinated into religious belief. Although as a child, I sang in various churches under my voice instructor. And that is where I got an inside, sort of like, I wouldn't say totally inside, but sort of a peripheral view of religion, Christianity in particular. And it was just something that I really didn't think I wanted to be quite involved with. Over the years, I reconciled to saying I was spiritual but not religious. But then I really came full circle with my atheism back in 2010, right before I got involved with the secular community. And during that time, over the years, as the organization continued to grow, as well as my involvement in the community, I transitioned to full-time activism in 2018. I was formerly the event services manager at the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention at their headquarters campus right near Emory University here in Atlanta. And so from there, I just took on running Black Nonbelievers full time and being involved in the movement, which for the most part is still volunteer. So if you see the link underneath my picture, you can further support my activism through Patreon, where I blog and share a lot of information that might be helpful. Some of it I talk a lot about some things that are going on in my personal life that can be relatable to others in the movement. But yes, I am fully involved. I took that leap into secular activism now 4 years ago. And I still say that that is one of the best decisions I've ever made in my life. So as Carrie said, I do currently serve on the boards for American Atheists and the American Humanist Association, as well as Humanist Global Charity. And something that she didn't mention before, I was the UU Humanist Association's Person of the Year in 2018, which also led to me receiving the Secular Student Alliance's Backbone Award in 2019, along with the Freedom from Religion Foundation's Free Thought Heroine Award that same year. In 2020, I was one of the co-recipients of the Harvard Humanist of the Year Award, along with my sister, Sikivu Hutchinson, and Ijoma Oluo. And this year, I was a recipient of the 2022 Irving and Annabelle Wilson Award, which is presented by the Unitarian Universalist Church of Worcester in Massachusetts. And one thing I always say is that I did not get involved for the recognition, but it is nice when it comes. And last but not least, I am a certified humanist celebrant. And after this presentation, I will be officiating my second wedding. So I am not in the Atlanta area, I'm not at home, I am in the Chattanooga area, preparing to officiate this ceremony this afternoon. And this is something I'm very proud of, because offering these services to our community is very, very important. And I'm very, very glad to join the network and family of humanist celebrants. So getting into the talk, and when we talk about activism, I like to give definitions, because that is the best way that we can clarify the subject matter. And so the definition of activism that I found was a doctrine or practice that emphasizes direct, vigorous action, especially in support of or opposition to one side of a controversial issue. And we have seen our fair share of those issues over these past few years. And also recently, right? We've been hearing a lot about reproductive justice, especially pertaining to abortion rights. So this type of activism, is definitely needed in support of that. So just giving that as one example, but certainly over the years, we have seen plenty of it. And also, I like to include definitions of community, because I would be remiss if that isn't what we are building and what I have been doing for the past 11 years, or have been doing my part. So definitions of community are a feeling of fellowship with others, a result of sharing common goals. Gosh, I can't say everything there. I'm sure y'all can. But also similarity or identity, and joint ownership or liability. So this is what we are bringing together as an atheist humanist community, which definitely leads to the activism that we are imparting. And that is very, very important because our identities are still considered controversial. They are still, even though the number of religious nuns are rising, the fact that there are still relatively few, comparatively few, openly identified atheists and humanists is very, very important to note. So even our existence is still considered controversial in a lot of ways. So what it takes to be an activist as well as to be a part of a community, especially if you have stepped up to help build and lead it, it does take dedication, inspiration, of course, not divine inspiration. Most of us get our inspiration and our drive to do what we do through other human beings and perhaps other literature that may be based on religious entities in some way, which there's nothing wrong with, but it's better to be honest about that. Resources, of course, money is the most important one, but it's not the only one that what it takes to build a community and to be an activist. And of course, teamwork. We don't do this by ourselves. We do not live in a bubble. We are not isolated. We are all in this together. So it is important for us to continue to work together as much as we can, even if we don't agree on everything. So I found this, many of you may be familiar with the 10 Commitments of Humanism. And oftentimes, and what is still perceived as a humanist community and an atheist community, is that we live in these intellectual bubbles. We love to, show off, and we love to be, or we pride ourselves on being very well educated, very well informed, but that doesn't always translate to actual engagement. And that has been something that has been a challenge over these past 11 years, especially as it comes to diversity, equity, and inclusion. And I think it's important for us, that those of us who identify as humanists, to be fully aware of what that entails. And this is what I like about these 10 commitments. They involve, critical thinking, ethical development, social justice, service and participation, altruism, humility, environmentalism, global awareness, responsibility, and empathy. It's really important for us, especially to have empathy for those who have left religion and who are dealing with trauma as a result. Oftentimes, when we come to our atheist identities, it's very, very easy and very, very tempting to be, in some ways, very condescending, even if you don't realize it, towards our religious counterparts. And it's understandable because of what we had to deal with. However, having empathy for others does include those who are still overcoming that religious trauma, as well as those who are going through things in life, which many of us have and still go through. And it really helps reinforce our values to be understanding, even if you don't agree. Empathy is a huge part of building community, as well as becoming an activist for human rights. So that one in particular is very, very important. Now, are we all going to embody all of these 10 commitments at one time? No. We're human beings. We are fallible. We make mistakes. But what makes the difference between us and them is how we learn from it, how we acknowledge those mistakes, how we acknowledge what we may not be aware of, but also how we come back from that. How do we rebuild as a result, whether that is personally or on a community level and professionally. So if you've never seen these commitments, I highly recommend that that you take a look at them, and and you just try to do the best you can, however and whenever you can. So here is what humanist and secular activism looks like. These are just some examples. We have participated in protests previously. We have also done service projects. And I'm really, really happy to share that for this year's Secular Week of Action, we have participated, Black Nonbelievers here in Atlanta, participated in a service project for a local urban farm that was in the Atlanta area. And so this is what we think of when we look at activism, being out front, protesting, unrightfully so, because there are issues that impact our communities as well as a number of people outside of our communities. And we have to make sure that we and others are aware of the policies that could impact us. And it's important that we fight against that, as well as helping others as much as we can. However, what it also looks like that many people may not think about when it comes to activism are some examples of the interfaith dialogue that we engage in. And one example is the God Talk series that is produced by the Smithsonian's National Museum for African American Culture, which has now started including the non-religious perspective, which is very, very important, especially as it pertains to Black and other communities of color. It also includes social events, which include community building and support. And you see one of the pictures from our annual cruise. Many people may think that that is just simply about having fun. That is only one aspect to it. It is also a really good way to help people expand their worldview, also how they travel, and also traveling with like-minded individuals and getting to know more of us, as well as reinforcing that support, because many of us still need it. It also looks like how we commemorate our departed, those who have passed away, our members who we've lost. And this year, we've lost a few members. One of them was a longtime member, Jean Taylor, who was based in the Atlanta area. The other is Larice Howery, who was a Chicago resident. And they both passed away in February. And it makes a difference how we honor them, especially as open and unapologetic atheists, humanists, and non-believers. This is something that we should definitely all do as a community. And I'm pretty sure that y'all being a on the ground entity in the Chicago area where y'all have a building where y'all meet, I'm pretty sure that y'all engage in this already, but it's important for us to not to capitalize off of it, but to at least spotlight and showcase those who were very, very near and dear to us in this community, some of whom are closer to us or to each other than our own families. And last but not least, it certainly looks like equitable media coverage and features. And if you are a longer time member of the American Humanist Association and you subscribe to the Humanist magazine, then you would have received the Five Fierce Humanists edition or the issue from July, August in 2018, which featured myself, Zakibu Hutchinson, Bridget Crutchfield, Candace Gorham, and Liz Ross as the first multiple Black women to be featured on the cover. The only other person that was featured on the cover of the Humanist magazine was Alice Walker, the year she won a Humanist of the Year award. So in its 80-year existence, Things are getting better, but there's still a long way to go when it comes to the features and also how we are continuing to expand as well as better represent those of us who are in it. And those are very, very important ways. So I really want to talk about that presentation last month. So some of you may have been in Atlanta last month for the American Atheist Convention. Some of you may have been on social media. You may have seen some of the some of the comments and the fallout from the talk that I did there, which was on how to address white supremacy in our community and what we can do about it. So American Atheists did tweet a slide that I will show you right now, where I indicated 10 ways that we as a community may be upholding white supremacy as non-believers. Now, these are very practical things, and I wanted to make sure that the talk was not heavily intellectual in nature, because as an organizer in this movement, I am very, very big on how we engage each other regularly. And if there are ways that we may be causing some harm, then it's important that we look at the practical ways that this might be occurring, as well as what we can do to change that. So apparently this slide made some folks very upset. And of course, without having the full context of the talk, which was not live streamed, hopefully the video will be released in the near future, but we're not rushing it because those who started some very nasty attacks against me, as well as American Atheists, I don't think they deserve to be validated by feeling like we have to be rushed to justify and explain ourselves. However, this was one of the slides that was tweeted out, but what was also tweeted by the American Humanist Association was this other slide that I presented, which actually came before this one, but hopefully it gives some better context, because just as I gave definitions today, I also gave definitions during that presentation. And those were just some other points that I brought up. And the point was that in some way, because white supremacy and racism is institutional as well as foundational, all of us in some way may be upholding it without realizing it. And as a community that prides ourselves on research, learning more, having a better understanding, and being more compassionate, it's also about accountability. How are we holding ourselves accountable for these things? But of course, there are some people who this is lost on, and their need to argue or to act like they are right under the guise of intellectual discourse certainly reared its ugly head. And so I know I don't have to justify this in any way, but the main reason why I'm bringing this up is because there are still a lot of atheists and humanists who would still have a knee-jerk reaction and feel the need to fight against seeing something like this, because what they see as humanism is still very, very narrow-minded. And that it's not to be insulting, but it is what it is. And for those of us, people of color, and who represent further marginalized communities, as we continue to engage and point these things out, we realize that there's going to be some pushback, because as human beings, we don't like to be wrong, or, to feel like we're, being, knocked over the head with certain things. However, as a community that is still evolving, as well as a community that is engaging the general public more, and we want to engage the general public more, We have to continue to offer this correction to ourselves, as well as ways that we can sufficiently improve so that we can do better by ourselves and others around us. So when it comes to living our commitments, right, this certainly is not simply supposed to be theoretical. Humanism isn't just simply an identity, it should be a way of life. It should be how we are incorporating those values every day and in ways that aren't necessarily seen or displayed for the general public. You know, it certainly is what you do, how you treat people every day and in private when there is not an opportunity for this to be displayed. So in living our commitments and being a better humanist community, being better humanists, it's important to meet people where they are, especially, let's say, if you are involved in, environmental justice, if you are involved in any way with racial justice efforts, it's important to meet the people where they are and also engage the people who are directly impacted. It doesn't help if you're only talking about it in your circles. You have to get out and engage the people who are directly impacted and meeting them where they are. Also showing up. Many of us still do have lives. We have families. Many of us still have jobs and other responsibilities, and that is certainly understandable. We certainly don't want to put the weight of that on our shoulders, but it is important to show up, not just in regular participation within our own organizations or groups, but also other organizations. And listen, make sure you are listening to people. It is not just about us talking. Do and listen to understand, not to respond. That was always a thing when it came to my development, as a manager. I was a management professional for years. And certainly I still am in my capacity with running this organization, as well as serving on the boards that I do. So listening is very, very important to living our commitment as humanists and getting better understanding of the issues at hand, as well as who we're engaging. It's also good to ask thoughtful questions, not just asking questions to ask them. And unfortunately, I've seen quite a few people do that. Also be sincere and compassionate. And that goes back to the empathy piece, and also the altruism piece with the 10 commitments. And be consistent. These can't be just one-time efforts. Again, consistency is the name of the game here. The more we do it and the more we learn from previous actions and previous mistakes that may have been made, the better we get. And to continue this, it's important to live our commitments through collaborations with other organizations and on various initiatives. If necessary, you can create a task force based on diversity, equity, and inclusion. I know that is the buzz phrase or the buzzwords. However, they cannot just simply be buzzwords. You have to be committed to it, and that often does require many of us to take a deep dive into how we may have done things before, how we may have understood things before, and what that truly is, and what you can do to what you can do on your part to help improve it. And this is mainly for organizational leaders. Do try to develop more diverse and inclusive materials. Those optics do make a difference. Who is being represented in your branding really does make a difference in how, in the communities and the people you are trying to reach. And if people don't feel like they are being seen, then that will definitely impact them. And it also impacts the growth of your groups or your organizations. So that is very, very important. And with that being said, Also be open to changing your messaging. Certainly we don't have to, to me, tact is everything. Does it mean that we have to always softball our message? No. Does it mean that we have to hide our non-religious identities? No. Because again, our actions always speak louder than the words, but the messaging does help, especially if you are trying to reach out, again, to folks who never knew that there was a community, who didn't know that, we existed as people. And as we try, again, to connect more and connect better with others, it's good to at least look at our messaging, the language, whether it's relatable to people, whether it's going over their heads or not. That is something that as a community, I think we should continue to consider when we want to make sure we're not talking at people and that we are talking to them and not being condescending towards them in any way. Be open to doing targeted outreach. There's nothing wrong with that. If you are trying to reach a specific community, or if you are participating in something that is targeted, like if there is a specific Heritage Month, that there is certainly nothing wrong with doing that as long as you are not appropriating anything from anyone. That is important to note as well. Do be open to providing bilingual versions of information, especially if you are in a community where English may be a second or third language. If you have the resources to do that, certainly that would be a very, very good thing. And if you need to collaborate with other organizations, for example, like Hispanic American Freethinkers or Ex-Muslims of North America, organizations that deal with folks who speak various languages, it would be good to do that. And of course, last but not least, do support the organizations and initiatives that are doing racial justice work. It has been a very, very disappointing thing to see at times the number of humanists who fight back against like Black Lives Matter statements and Black Lives Matter movements, racial justice work. Certainly there have been many folks who have asked, well, what does that have to do with humanism? And the answer to that is everything. When there are people who have been historically and institutionally impacted negatively, it is our responsibility as humanists to not just be more aware of it, to acknowledge it, and also acknowledge the role that maybe some humanists have played, whether it was in support of or even against these initiatives. And there have been some who have been against it historically. And it doesn't mean that it takes away from their other accomplishments, but they are not godlike or they are not gods. So it's important to acknowledge, but simply, and also as we acknowledge the fallacies and the flaws in the God concept, it is important to acknowledge those those characteristics and those flaws in those human beings. It's never a good idea to just simply ignore them. And it can only make us a more better and a more honest community when we do that. So activism, in short, isn't just what we do, it's how we do it. And that's also true when it comes to diversity, equity, and inclusion efforts. Even if it isn't something that is, you feel like it's in your wheelhouse to do, you can certainly understand and respect those who do it and support it in some way. So the first picture here is from the first Women of Color Beyond Belief conference, and this is the you're looking at myself, Sakibu, and Bridget Crutchfield. And that is at the core of our activism: envision, execution, and exuberance. If you are conceptualizing an event or uh, something, whether it's, I'm going to say not just an event, but whether it's a protest or some other type of program, is good to have that clear vision, but it's also important that you execute, you put it together, and then also be excited about it, share it, and get others excited as well, if possible. And also another, goodness gracious, my computer is being weird, but these are also other ways to be an activist. It's more than one way to do it. And that these are things that I have showed previously in the slides. But of course, visuals are important. It's important to see them again and again and again. And last but not least here, oh, darn it. I thought I had, oh yes, there was another picture of one of my favorite bands now, Moonchild, who is a very, very socially aware group. And they have a simple motto which says, spend your privilege. Most people, we throw that word privilege around quite a bit. I know we may get tired of hearing it. And that is understandable to an extent, but we do have to acknowledge some of the privilege that some folks have had in this community, that they may not be aware of what others go through. And so the best way, one of the best ways, if you want to utilize your privilege in any way, is to spend it, also known as putting your money where your mouth is. And with that, I would like to say that with all of this, the community is getting better. I have seen some really, really good changes, and I am very proud to have been a part of that. We are engaging more community members, people who are leaving and who want to get a better understanding of what it means to be a humanist, atheist, non-believer, etc. And it's important for us to understand the impact that we may have on folks and how we are changing lives, whether that was what we set out to do or not. People are impacted by the work that we do, and it is being seen, even though some of us as organizers, sometimes it feels like it's a rough road ahead at times, but it really is, there is a change happening here. So there are a few examples from our Being Changes Lives campaign in which there were members and allies who wrote about their journeys out of religion, finding our organization, and how we have impacted their lives in various ways. Activism is also good for like data reporting. For those of you who have not seen this before, this is the Black Non-Religious Americans report that was released jointly with American Atheists, which shows how the Black non-religious demographic does indeed face many more challenges than our non-POC counterparts, and to give a better understanding as to why our organization is needed. And I shared the picture of the wedding that I did for this beautiful couple last year on this same date. So this is very, very significant for me because it is the anniversary of the first humanist ceremony that I officiated and that I'm doing today. And you also see the National Museum for African American Culture, because in addition to the God Talk program, they now have some of our materials to include for future research and future exhibits. So this is major for us. I think that Black Nonbelievers is the only secular organization, and now feel free to correct me if I'm wrong, but I think we now have the distinct honor of being featured in some way by the Smithsonian Institution. And this is worthy of your support. This is worthy of your participation. This is also worthy of sharing with your own organizations to show how we are further expanding our activism and engagement with the general public. And it is not something to be taken lightly, because again, this work can be very challenging at times, but it is worth it when we are able to reach these institutions and provide these examples of the communities that we're building, the activism that we're doing, as well as our collaborative efforts. It makes a huge, huge difference, not just in society, but also for the members, for our members that we engage, the people that we come to know and love, which is very, very important. So with that, here's some recommended reading for those of you, because we have to have that. The first is When Colorblindness Isn't the Answer, Humanism and the Challenge of Race by Dr. Anthony Penn. Some of you who we affectionately refer to as Tony. Many of you may be familiar with him in humanist circles. I highly recommend you reading that book if you haven't already, as well as Humanists in the Hood, Unapologetically Black, Feminist, and Heretical by Sikibu Hutchinson, as well as Justice-Centered Humanism by Royce Speckhart, the former executive director of the American Humanist Association. And here's what's new for Black nonbelievers in 2022. Earlier this year, we launched our YouTube show called In the Cut, where we feature folks who are involved in our community, particularly within the Black atheist demographic. We air every first and third Saturdays at 1 p.m. Eastern. Our host is Kevon Cameron, who is our New York City area affiliate organizer. And we've also launched religious trauma group coaching, which is in partnership with My Choice, My Power Counseling. And the next round of sessions will be coming up in June. So if you are interested, and we do ask for BIPOC participants only or mainly, because this is a resource that still isn't as readily available or accessible. So we wanted to make sure that we did that for those participants. Now, there are plenty of religious trauma outlets, which is amazing and they're important, but it is crucial to have those type of sessions that reflect communities who have a harder time overcoming religion. And so, but if you are one of those folks who are interested, there is just a nominal fee per session. You may register at our website for the next round of sessions. And also, I would encourage you to follow and subscribe to Be In on social media. We are on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, and we love to get our followers up. So if you aren't already, because that was an interesting metric that was attacked during that speech that I discussed, which is very interesting. I mean, I'm kind of being facetious here, but I just thought that was kind of, sadly hilarious. But we also encourage you to subscribe to our YouTube channel, where you can view our new show, as well as videos from our previous programs, including the Women of Color Beyond Belief Conference and our 10th anniversary last year. Of course, I encourage you to donate and support to Black nonbelievers. At our website, first and foremost, there is an option for you to become a monthly donor, which we highly encourage. We are also on Cash App at Black nonbelievers. You can also designate us as a charity on Amazon Smile. And if your place of employment has a workplace giving program, the only notable exception at this time is the combined federal campaign. We are working on that. But if your place of employment has a charitable giving program, all you need is our name and our tax ID number, which is on our website. And you can designate a portion of your paycheck to benefit our organization. And of course, I have to highlight that our upcoming events include the 2022 Women of Color Beyond Belief Conference, which is taking place once again in Chicago from September 30th to October 2nd at the Marriott Chicago Midway. We are still offering student discounted rates. You have the option to take advantage of the payment plan if you cannot register for the admission all at once. And the full admission does include meals during the conference. That is a point of, that is a point of reference, because at most conferences, you have to pay the registration fee, plus your travel, plus your accommodations, plus food. So we wanted to make sure that we were inclusive with our admission price. And it is come one, come all. This is a production of Black Nonbelievers, the Black Skeptics Group, and the Women's Leadership Project. So if you are already in Chicago, or if you will be visiting at that time, please do, or if you hadn't already decided on it, please make your plans to come to the Women of Color Beyond Belief Conference, as well as, or our annual cruise convention. We are back on track this year. We did the cruise last year after a hiatus in 2020 due to the pandemic. Everything went well last year, and we expect it to go well this year's too. And we will be on the Carnival Spirit. The dates of the BNC Con are November 26th through December 3rd. We sail out on November 27th. You can visit our website or go directly to bnccon.com to register. There is still time to pay a deposit and pay incrementally. You really want to join us for this one. It is an amazing event. And I always say you must experience the being difference, and come experience how we build community and how we engage in activism, and just expand on our secular family. And with that, I'd like to say thank you all once again for having me, and I will now take questions.
Thank you so much, Mandisa, for that really interesting talk. We'll have an audience Q&A in just a few minutes, so audience, you can start thinking about your questions now. First, we'll have a musical interlude during which we invite you to donate to the Ethical Humanist Society. It is through our generosity that we show how meaningful these Sunday morning programs are. A donation of $5 or any amount that you're comfortable with is greatly appreciated. Contributions can be made at our website. The link should be posted in the YouTube chat now. And the in-person audience can scan the QR codes or to donate online, or just put some cash in the cash donation basket. Thank you to all who sustain the society with your donations of time and money. now invite questions from the audience. In-person audience members will line up at this microphone to ask your questions, and YouTube viewers will enter your questions in the chat box, and then I will read them from here as well. Questions, just a reminder, should be brief and phrased as questions and not comments. And we'll get to as many as possible. So we'll start with a few from in person, and then I'll read some online questions.
Thanks so much for your talk. And as a fellow, I'm a celebrant as well. And so I'm excited for you to do your wedding.
Thank you.
It's a very cool way to be involved in people. I have a memorial next week that weirdly I'm looking forward to. It's really an interesting way to engage with people. I don't know if this is going to make sense. I don't have it as a well-formed question, but one of the things that I think we struggle with in our community is ourselves as an end versus a means. And so when we think about activism, I need to be more active in helping grow our community because it's small and not as vital as we might want it to be, while at the same time, a lot of the people who are attracted here want to be part of something that's doing something else. So we want to be doing ethical action activities of different types, and yet we do have a finite amount of time and energy to focus. And I'm just curious if you can talk a little bit about your group as the thing you need to be an activist for versus your group attracting people who are activists for other things.
So I think about how those things can work together. It doesn't have to be one or the other. So yes, there are specifically organizations that may focus on that have a specific focus, whether it is people or a certain cause, and certainly those causes, do impact a number of people, and mostly Black Nonbelievers as an organization is community building. We are social in nature. However, that doesn't mean that as a community that we cannot stand for and engage with those initiatives and causes, because the very nature of our existence is a result of a largely religious community, and that representation matters. So in that, we are multifaceted. And I think some of the challenges that we face in humanist communities is, again, how do we expand our level of activism while still trying to grow a community base. And it's a tough one at times because, like you said, many of us still have lives that we are living, and it's, for us, it can be no one person can do everything. And I think that's what's important about the teamwork aspect that I mentioned earlier, is that if there is something that is of interest or a passion of some folks within your group, I think it's a good idea to be represented on that larger scale. But if you have the time and the availability to do it and to represent our humanism and our organizations, then please do so. And sometimes it means making sacrifices. There are times where there may be a thing that we don't want to do, but for the sake of our community, as well as for the causes that we are fighting for, it's important for us to, especially if you are taking on a leadership role, you have to be prepared to, to expand and diversify what it is that we do, and to also help recruit some, get the folks involved. I think there are, and like you said, we struggle with this, we've got, especially in the pandemic, has just been absolutely challenging for us when it comes to that. And it's going to take a while to really get back to the point where, we are fully engaged, but it's a matter of remaining consistent. And if there is an opportunity for us to not just simply be social, but to participate in other initiatives, then do it.
for speaking to us today. I wanted to ask you if you think that Black non-believers face greater or a different set of challenges living their non-belief, and if so, if you could talk about that a bit. Thank you.
It's not a think, it's a fact. And as I stated, I held up the Black Non-Religious Americans report, which is available through the American Atheist website, or you can go to secularsurvey.org. Many Black non-religious folks face higher levels of concealment, higher rates of depression, as well as this notion of what it means to be an atheist in Black communities. There are stigmas, not just simply about atheism, but what it means to be connected to the Black community and the Black identity if you are an atheist, which is something that many white atheists, even though we share a lot of similarities when it comes to leaving religion, your identity is never really tied into that as much as if you are Black or another person of color, because religion is so cultural and embedded that it makes it much more challenging. And so as an organization, we really wanted to meet this challenge, not just to bring more folks together and to say, hey, you know what, you're not alone in this. Even if it was an isolating experience previously, we understand that, but you are definitely not alone. And also that we are sufficiently a part of Black communities as well as the secular community, which actually deserves and needs more support, because that means that we have more challenges that we face, as an organization due to the heavy institutional role that the church has played. And which leads to, again, those levels of concealment that was outlined in that report.
All right, this is a question from an online viewer. Does the use of the word atheist uphold or give the upper hand to religion? We would not use the word non-Christian unless we assumed that Christianity was the expected and appropriate position.
No, it doesn't, or at least not in my opinion, it does not. I think using the term atheist is very important. It serves to destigmatize the term as well as accurately define it. I know that there are a lot of people who are hesitant to use the word atheist, and certainly I use that interchangeably. I remember one time being afraid to use it because, it just it felt weird, but I think the more we use it, and that actually gives credence in some way, as if we always have to be concerned about what Christians or religious people think about us. And I know we've been put on the defense for so long that it almost becomes like second nature to us. And I don't think we always have to do that. I think it's important for believers to understand that their perspectives are not the only one, and that it is important to have factual and accurate information, and that there is nothing wrong with being an atheist. We realize that, because of the stigma of that identity, that we have, these challenges ahead of us. However, I am a strong proponent of using the term whenever possible, not to badger people with it or anything like that, but to be unapologetic about it. And I think about some of the folks who have come before us, who have gotten involved, who have had to sacrifice, and who have lost based on those identities. I think we owe it to them to impart this identity. It doesn't give credence to, the religious side. What it does give credence to are those who have overcome and recovered from those beliefs and had a better understanding of that atheist identity, it's good, it's better for supporting each other.
What is your strategy with recognizing and disengaging with those who argue and attack in bad faith despite your best efforts?
You know, I maybe give someone once or twice before I disengage. What's important to me is the community building and trying to help uplift fellow non-believers, especially those who are overcoming religious beliefs or who are overcoming that isolation or that ostracism. So to me, the arguing or the debates, while some people may engage with that, if I see that they are coming from a very loaded place, and I've seen this, I've experienced this a number of times with the question about why does there need to be a Black non-believers, and outright calling us a racist organization without even taking a look at our website. I saw this last month when we saw that folks who were pushing back against the slides without trying to understand any full context, and who were making videos about how I was saying how I was being racist, and I was telling these groups and organizations that they aren't doing enough to attract more people of color. I saw that when I see people who are coming from, you know, a very, you know, I try to at least maybe, like I said, if I see that they are completely being jerks or assholes, I don't engage them at all. But I at least try to give maybe one or two responses that are measured. And if I see that they aren't being, like I said, if someone is arguing in bad faith, if you will, then I disengage. I'm like, look, I'm not going to emotionally exhaust myself or mentally exhaust myself explaining something to someone who doesn't even want to understand. And I think it's important that as a community, we have a right to do that. We don't owe it to anyone to justify our existence, to justify our identities, or to even justify our actions, especially when we are not hurting anyone. So I think it's important for us to, and no one should have to be forced to, to explain themselves when they don't feel comfortable. I mean, it's always good to engage in objective dialogue if you want, but especially for people of color who, and especially Black folks, Black women in particular, who have always been the backbone of things and are often the most disrespected. We shouldn't always have to put ourselves in a position where we are defending ourselves completely because we already have to try to take better care of ourselves. So that is the long answer to that question.
All right, someone has a question about the cruise. What
Yay!
What kind of programming occurs so that people can interact with each other?
Yes, that is a very good question. So on the cruises, we have guest speakers. And we do the plenary sessions during the days at sea, which are the days where the cruises are sailing and before they go to each port. So we have a time period which is not engaging like all day. We have our sessions where we have the attendees come and listen to the speakers. We also do a group dinner every evening so that we are engaging each other. We have now started adding like a cigars and whiskey session where we may sit out on one of the decks and just have various conversations with each other with some things that, that we may like. We also participate with some of the other activities on the ship. Karaoke is one of our favorites. There are some folks who like to do, bingo. Some of us do like the casino, but the actual programming, as far as what we do as an organization, is the group dinners, which are always amazing. It's a chance for us to really get to talk and interact with each other um, daily, because when we go to the ports, people may want to do different things, and that's okay. We don't necessarily have to do everything as a group together, but and for those who meet each other or who've already known each other and who want to do different things, that's always great. But yeah, the main things are the talks from our speakers, where there's a lot of good information that is given, and we have access to, cruises, especially of that size, already have audio visual on, available. So we have those capabilities to do presentations like what we're doing today, as well as bring our computers, for PowerPoints and such. So it really provides an opportunity for learning. And the past couple of years, we also did dance lessons too, which were good. We may do that again this year, but it was a very, very good interactive piece.
I want to ask you a little bit about the idea about spend your privilege. Can you say anything about that beyond money? Is for me, as a person holding a lot of different kinds of privileges, not only in money, is there other things to do to help spend my privilege in spaces that you value?
Sure. So if you are a person who is good at graphic design, for example, and there's an organization that could use that assistance, certainly you can offer that service for either free or discounted, because I certainly don't want people to go broke trying to help others. I don't think that's productive at all. If there are other skills that you have that you think that would be beneficial to an organization or an individual, certainly it would be good to offer that. Or if you know of a network that is, yes, access to power. If you know of others that have those resources, encourage them to spend their privilege or to utilize their skills or whatever resources in those ways. It certainly doesn't have to be that. I mean, you certainly can do that yourself, but people don't realize, like, even the smallest amount helps. Whether that is money, whether that is time, whether that is resources, all of that is beneficial.
Since you explained about the cruises, can you talk about some of the programming that's planned for the conference in Chicago?
Yes, so of course we have, we always do a mixture of plenary sessions and breakout sessions. Compassion and Choices, who has been one of our sponsors since the first convention or the first conference, if you aren't familiar with them, and I highly recommend that you do become so. They are the end of life planning and also in many ways medical aid and dying organization. They have been lobbying for legislation for that, which we support as an organization. Certainly that we have discussions about, end of life, or how do we deal with grief and loss. Of course, a big thing is always reproductive justice, especially as pertaining to women and women of color and how that impacts us. Certainly how we are impacted as parents, as organizers. And we are also going to have a session on sexuality and sexual liberation, because as women, we have been negatively impacted by stigmas, especially as it pertains to religious dogma. So those are often those are often subjects that we tackle at this conference. The first year we were able to do the a service project. We would certainly like to do that again if we get enough support for it. That would, and the meals would benefit an organization that services people of color as well as disadvantaged LGBTQ folks. So we would like to do that as well, because we certainly like to put our money where our mouths are too. So there's going to be quite a few things, as well as yes, dancing with joy. We absolutely love to do that. We're also going to be tackling the mental health of women and those of us in particular who are slow overcoming religious belief. All of those things are tangible and real things that we deal with as a community, and it is important to hear them from women of color who experience it, as well as who are facilitating and who are activists in this movement.
On the subject of reproductive rights, one of the things that made me a little uneasy yesterday here in Chicago, and I don't know if it's two other places, is that there were two different sort of protest marches. One was planned at 9:30 in the morning by Planned Parenthood and a bunch of other groups, and then at 1 o'clock a group had a second one that was downtown. And speaking to a lot of young adults, you know, we have concerns about Planned Parenthood. They have a bad history of this, and Margaret Sanger that. And I understand those complaints, but I was very sad to see sort of these two different locuses of activity, when I think one really loud thing might have been more effective. And I'm curious if you're seeing a generational change, or if that doesn't worry you and I should just let it go.
Well, I think it's important to understand, first of all, listen to those people who have those concerns about Planned Parenthood. And Planned Parenthood is still a very white represented organization. It's possible. I think it would have been good to maybe ask that second entity why they felt it necessary, or whether they felt that it directly related to people of color. Sure, it would be ideal to just do one thing, but no one thing impacts us all equally. And I think it's important to understand that if there are the more of us doing that work, the better. It's possible that the local Planned Parenthood may or may not have acknowledged, and I've seen Planned Parenthood acknowledge Margaret Sanger's problematic history. It's important for people to understand that even though there are some folks who equate eugenics to genocide incorrectly, it is important to acknowledge that she did share, or she did hold, some of these white supremacist ideals even with her work. And listening to those communities that may be affected and not talking down to them, you know, saying you understand, but this is, you know, because I think some of those notions about her are mistaken. You know, I don't think that people are speaking to them, you know, correctly. However, it is good to acknowledge that there was a challenge. And if that wasn't the case, then that could be a cause for why there were two separate events. I mean, there are some people who I think the divide comes in when there is a lack of, not just a lack of understanding, but an unwillingness to understand. This is what has happened. This is what tends to happen in many movements, especially in resistance movements. When you are failing to listen, especially to the people who are impacted, then guess what? Something else may pop up. And if you want to avoid that, then it's good to at least try to be, you know, like I said, understanding, learning from history, learning from those mistakes, and being more inclusive, so that people know that they are heard. Because, I mean, we really are, this is still a fight for us to be heard on that other side. But when we have these challenges within our own communities, yes, these things do happen. And it's just, you know, it's nothing new. You know, if you study history, you've seen this happen even within religious movements. I don't think it's something to be discouraged by. However, it'll be interesting to watch and see how we can still find common ground.
As a Black atheist, how do you communicate to other atheists that their alliance and support, while not necessary, is welcomed and enriching?
I always say that, first of all, Black Nonbelievers as an organization, while we have a focus on the Black demographic, we welcome support and participation from everyone. And those who are, especially online, can attest to this. I am very, very careful that I have engaged with some really, really wonderful people in this movement in 11 years. And I am very, very proud of the connections that we make. And the one thing I always say is that this helps all of us. You know, when I point out that there is information about Black historical humanists and freethinkers that many people don't know, this is information that is beneficial to everyone. It's not just Black history, it's American history. There are a number of iconic Black humanists and also other humanists of color that have contributed significantly to our growth, but yet their voices are still unheard and overlooked. So our existence seeks to rectify that, as well as improve the very landscape of our communities. And it really is beneficial to the development and growth of all of us, not just simply myself as a Black atheist woman who happens to lead an organization, but this really, really does help because, again, we are a community that prides ourselves on education, information, verification. And so this must continue. And as more people, especially people of color, leaving their religious communities, how we engage, how we listen and understand. And I say we because I am a part of this community. And I always just try to emphasize how important this is to all of us.
All right, I think that's it for the questions. So thank you once again, Mandisa.
Thank you once again for having me, and thank you to everyone who tuned in online.
Thank you for attending today's program. Those of you who are here in person, please join us in the courtyard on this lovely day for some refreshments and conversation. And thank you again, Mandisa.
Thank you all so much.